Part 7, The Long Road Home Continued, Chapter 26. The first 100 miles were a symphony of strained silence and the drone of the station wagon's engine. Alice stared out the passenger window, watching the familiar Arizona desert blur into a landscape of her own anxieties. Mel, for his part, fiddled relentlessly with the radio, unable to find a station that met his exacting standards, which seemed to be a mix of polka sports talk and the shipping forecast, none of which were readily available in the middle of the desert. "How can you listen to this racket," he grumbled as a pop song crackled through the speakers. "It sounds like a bunch of cats fighting in an alley." "It's the #1 song in the country," Mel Alice said, not taking her eyes off the road. "That don't make it good," he muttered, twisting the dial again, landing on a burst of static. "That's better." They stopped for lunch at a place called the Dusty Spoon, a tired-looking roadside diner that was a pale imitation of their own. From the moment they walked in, Mel was in critic mode. "Look at this," he whispered to Alice, pointing at the sugar dispenser with his thumb. "Caked, humidity's getting in, bad seal." He ordered the meatloaf, and when it arrived, he dissected it with the grim focus of a coroner. "Too much breadcrumb," he announced after a single thoughtful bite. "Filler. And the gravy, it's from a can. I can taste the tin." The waitress, a young woman with a weary expression, overheard him. "If you don't like it, you don't have to eat it," she said, her voice flat. "Oh, I'm gonna eat it," Mel assured her. "But I'm not gonna be happy about it." Watching him, Alice felt a strange pang of affection. This was who he was, a man whose entire worldview was filtered through the lens of a diner owner. He couldn't just eat a meal. He had to analyze it, deconstruct it, and find it wanting. It was infuriating, and it was also, in its own way, a testament to the pride he took in his own work. He wasn't just a cook. He was a guardian of a certain standard, even if that standard mostly involved the correct meat-to-breadcrumb ratio. As they got back on the road, the silence between them was different. It was less tense, more companionable. "You really think he'll be okay?" Alice asked, her voice small. Mel kept his eyes on the road. "I don't know," he said, his honesty a small comfort. "But he's your kid. He's got your grit. That's got to count for something." He turned the radio dial, and this time when he landed on the catfight pop song, he left it on. Chapter 27. The college campus was another planet. After the flat, sun-baked landscape of Arizona, the lush green lawns and imposing brick buildings felt like a foreign country. Young people with backpacks and serious expressions hurried along winding pathways, their faces illuminated by the glow of their phones. It was a world of ambition and potential, and Alice and Mel in their rumbling station wagon felt like two very out-of-place aliens. They found Tommy's dormitory, a hulking brick structure named after a long-dead benefactor. The air inside smelled of stale pizza and air freshener. They walked down a long, echoing hallway, the doors covered in cartoons and concert flyers, until they found his room. Alice's hand trembled as she knocked. The door opened, and there he was. He was thinner than she remembered, and there were dark circles under his eyes. The easy, confident smile he'd had when he left was gone, replaced by a strained, tired expression. He was wearing a wrinkled t-shirt and sweatpants, and for a moment he just looked at them, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and relief. "Mom," he whispered. "Mel, what are you guys doing here?" "We were in the neighborhood," Mel grunted, trying to sound casual. Alice didn't say anything. She just pulled her son into a fierce hug, burying her face in his shoulder. She could feel the sharp angles of his bones through his shirt, and a fresh wave of fear and love washed over her. He was her boy, and he was drowning. The room behind him was a mess of unwashed clothes, empty noodle cups, and textbooks lying open to unread pages. It was the room of someone who had given up. The reunion was awkward and heavy with unspoken words. The bright, hopeful future she had imagined for him felt a million miles away from this small, sad room. Chapter 28. They sat in the campus coffee shop, a sterile, soulless place that made Alice long for the cracked vinyl of her own booths. Tommy, hunched over a cup of tea he wasn't drinking, finally began to talk. He spoke of the crushing pressure of his classes, the feeling that everyone else was smarter, more prepared. He talked about the loneliness, the vast echoing anonymity of a large university. "I just feel like I'm faking it," he said, staring into his cup. "Like any minute someone's going to figure out I don't belong here." Alice's maternal instincts kicked in. She launched into a speech of encouragement, her voice full of a desperate, forced optimism. "You can do this, Tommy. You just have to apply yourself. You're the smartest boy I know. You just need to buckle down." But her words felt hollow, a string of well-meaning platitudes that weren't reaching him. She was trying to fix it to smooth it over, but this was a problem that couldn't be fixed with a hug and a pep talk. It was Mel who cut through the noise. He leaned forward, his elbows on the table, and looked Tommy straight in the eye. "So you're scared," he said, his voice a low rumble. "You think you're gonna fail. Welcome to the club, kid." Tommy looked up surprised. "Let me tell you something," Mel continued. "I failed. A lot. I bought a fancy car for $20 and thought I was king of the world. It ended up in a scrap heap. I quit my diner to take a fancy corporate job. I lasted a week. I've had more culinary disasters than I've had hot meals. There were days I wanted to lock the door of that diner and never come back." He took a breath. Being scared is part of it. Feeling like you're in over your head is part of it. The only thing you can't do is quit on yourself. It's okay to be lost, kid. Everybody gets lost. But you gotta at least try to find your way back before you burn the map. He wasn't offering a solution. He was offering something far more valuable: validation. He was telling Tommy that his fear was not a sign of weakness, but a part of the human experience. He was connecting with him, not as a parent, but as a fellow traveler on the bumpy, unpredictable road of life. A long silence followed. Tommy looked from Mel's surprisingly earnest face to his mother's tear-filled eyes. He took a deep, shuddering breath, the first real breath he seemed to have taken in weeks. A tiny, fragile crack had appeared in the wall of his despair. Chapter 29. There was no magic moment of resolution. Tommy didn't suddenly declare his love for academia. But something had shifted. He agreed to see the semester through. He agreed to talk to a campus counselor. He agreed to call home more often, not just when things were bad. It was a compromise, a truce with his own unhappiness, but it was a start. Alice had to learn the hardest lesson a parent can learn to let go. She couldn't fight his battles for him. She couldn't guarantee his happiness. All she could do was stand in his corner, as Mel had said, and trust that the grit she had passed on to him would be enough. The drive back to Phoenix was quiet, but it was a different kind of quiet. The frantic anxiety had been replaced by a thoughtful, melancholy peace. "You were good with him, Mel," Alice said as the miles of highway rolled by. "He's a good kid." Mel grunted, his eyes on the road. Just needed to hear that it's okay to screw up. They stopped at the Dusty Spoon again on the way back. Mel ordered the meatloaf. "Still too much breadcrumb," he announced, but this time he said it with a small, almost imperceptible smile. Alice felt a sense of calm settle over her. The problem wasn't solved, not by a long shot, but she had faced it. She had shown up. She had done what a mother does. The rest was up to him. Chapter 30. They returned to a diner that was in a state of controlled chaos. Jolene and Vera had indeed held down the fort. They had also, in a burst of creative energy, created a new daily special, the Furry Friend Fiesta, which was a cheeseburger with 2 olives placed on top to look like hamster eyes. It had not been a big seller. The familiar sights and smells of the diner wrapped around Alice like a warm blanket. The cracked booths, the humming coffee machine, the faint, ever-present scent of chili, it had never felt more like home. A few days later, the phone rang during a lull in the afternoon rush. It was Tommy. His voice sounded stronger, clearer. He told her about a history class he was starting to enjoy. He talked about a girl he'd met in the library. He didn't say he was happy, not yet, but he sounded like he was on the way. Alice hung up the phone, a slow, genuine smile spreading across her face. "Pick-up Hyatt Mel," bellowed from the kitchen. "Order of hash going cold." She took a deep breath, the familiar chaos of the diner, a comforting symphony. She picked up her notepad and turned toward the kitchen pass-through. "On my way, Mel," she called out, her voice clear and steady. Her family, both near and far, was going to be all right. The lunch rush was on and she was ready. Part 8. Jolene's Song Chapter 31. Life, having been thrown into a spin cycle of crises, finally settled into a comfortable, predictable rhythm. The threat of the Comet Cafe had faded its sterile chrome no match for the lived-in soul of Mel's diner. Tommy was finding his footing at college. The chili was code compliant and the hamster population remained stable. For the first time in a long time, the biggest drama on any given day was Mel trying to figure out who was stealing his pickle spears from the jar in the walk-in. It was Earl. The catalyst for the next upheaval arrived on a quiet Thursday afternoon, looking like 1,000 other sun-blasted tourists who wandered in off the highway. He was a lanky man with a kind, crinkly smile and a spectacular snakeskin belt cinched around his waist. He slid into a booth, ordered a slice of apple pie and a coffee, and settled in an island of calm in the gentle afternoon lull. Mel's pawnshop jukebox, having been repaired with a well-aimed whack from a rubber mallet, was playing a classic country ballad. It was a mournful tune about a truck driver, a lost love, and a long, lonely stretch of highway. Jolene, while refilling the salt shaker, started humming along. Then, almost unconsciously, she began to sing her voice a low, sweet counterpoint to the jukebox's warble. She wasn't performing, she was just singing to herself the way someone might idly tap their fingers on a tabletop. But the voice that emerged was anything but idle. It was rich and clear, with a thread of pure, authentic heartbreak woven through it. The kind of voice that sounded like it had been aged in an oak barrel of genuine country soul. Alice paused a coffee pot in her hand and listened. Vera stopped polishing the counter, a dreamy look on her face. Even Mel in the kitchen stopped scraping the griddle for a moment. They'd all heard Jolene sing before humming along to the radio, but never like this. It was as if a hidden part of her had slipped out unannounced. When the song finished, the man in the snakeskin belt was staring at Jolene, a look of profound astonishment on his face. He hadn't touched his pie. "Ma'am," he said, his voice a soft Texas drawl. That was something else. Jolene, startled out of her reverie, blushed. "Oh, I was just fooling around." "Well, you fool around better than most people work," he said, that crinkly smile returning. He reached into the pocket of his embroidered shirt and pulled out a business card. "My name's Smiley Rogers. I'm in A&R for Starlight Records out of Nashville." He slid the card across the table. Jolene stared at it as if it were a scorpion. "You have a voice, ma'am," Smiley Rogers continued. "A real voice, the kind people listen to. If you ever decide you want to do more than just fool around with it, you give me a call." He stood up, placed a $10 bill on the table for his untouched pie, and tipped his imaginary hat. "A real pleasure," he said, and then he was gone, leaving behind a stunned silence and a small white business card that seemed to pulse with an impossible, terrifying potential. Chapter 32. The business card sat on the counter for 2 days, an object of intense speculation and debate. Jolene treated it with a mixture of awe and terror, refusing to touch it as if it might give her a static shock. A record producer, Vera, breathed her eyes wide. "In our diner, Jolene, you're going to be a star. We have to start thinking about your stage name. How about the Dixie Nightingale? How about the high-pitched hayseed?" Mel grumbled from the kitchen. "Don't be a dingbat. The guy was probably a shoe salesman with a fancy belt. He's just trying to get a date." "He didn't ask her for a date," Mel Alice pointed out, examining the card. It looked legitimate. Starlight Records, a Nashville address, a real phone number. He said she had a voice. "She's got a voice all right," Mel snorted. "I hear it all day long. Order up, pick up. Mel, your chili's on fire.